In the late afternoon of the 22nd of July 1942, a train left the Umschagplatz, which was a siding of the Gdansk railway station in Warsaw. The Umschagplatz, located at ulica Stawki, and prior to the war it had been one of these sidings which had been used largely for commercial purposes. That train arrived at Treblinka railway station the following morning, where it was directed to one of the sidings, and from the siding 20 wagons were decoupled, or rather after the 20th wagon it was decoupled, and that part of the train was brought here to the Treblinka death camp early in the morning of the 23rd of July 1942. The people had to leave the train, and we note that approximately some 100 people were chosen to act for labour. The rest of them were directed to the gas chamber, which stood up here, and they were murdered. Once that had been completed, the next 20 wagons were sent for, then the next, then the next. Now, the murder took all morning. At the beginning, it took them much longer until they learned how to do it. Of the prisoners that they selected to actually work for them, they were murdered at the end of their shift. So they were either shot or gassed, and this went on every single day. And where we're standing now, I mean, this is it's hard to believe that 900,000 people actually died here. And we have these stones which show us the countries they came from: Belgium, Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, France, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Bulgaria, Germany, Austria, Greece, and Macedonia, which I think is a recently placed stone. This was the second largest of all the Nazi death camps. This one here is above all associated with the destruction of the second largest Jewish community in the world, that of Warsaw. On the 1st of September 1939, Warsaw had 1.3 million inhabitants, and by the time the Nazis were kicked out, there were less than 1,000 people living there. Some of them were Jewish. Maybe not a lot. Who knows? We can't tell. One of them, of course, was the person who appeared in the Pianist, the book, and the film. Jews, of course, couldn't be evacuated because they would have been spotted in one of the transit camps. This monument was built in the 60s, and so we've got the names of many of the communities from which people actually came and who were destroyed here. Now, at the beginning, the commandant was one Irmfried Eberle. Eberle had worked in the T4, killing of the mentally and physically challenged. And Eberle also appears to have been involved in the murder of German soldiers who had been wounded. He was sent to the Eastern Front, part of the Organisation Tod, and there he was, it seems, it's not absolutely certain, but I think the evidence is relatively strong. That's what he was doing when he was there, and there's other people who were with him when he was there, such as Paulina Kniesler or Otto Horn. The latter was a guard here, and Kniesler was in various other facilities for murdering people as well. Eberle was incapable of doing the task. He kept ordering people to be sent here, and he couldn't kill them quick enough. The result was that not only was there a mess in the camp, and you can hear, for example, the testimony of Van Suchamel in Shoah where he talks about the mess that was outside in possibly in the area roughly where I am right now, and the suffering of people in these enclosed carriages in the heat of the summer, July and August of 1942, meant that there were carriages arriving where everybody was already dead. He was replaced by Franz Stangl, who was much more competent. And again, in this case, I can sort of refer you to Gita Sareni's work Into That Darkness. For me, the one of the number one books on the Holocaust is that of Samuel Willenberg, Revolt in Treblinka. He was brought here from Opatów in October of 1942, and he gives very good description of how he lived before, what it was like in the ghetto. And not only that, I think after his escape, his description of what life was like in Warsaw in 1944 is one of the best that I know anywhere. The area here in this camp, now it's often associated that the gas chambers were sort of maybe slightly, or the new gas chambers, the larger ones, which are slightly right of this monument, which would have meant the older gas chambers were a little bit further back. The area where I'm now walking into was the area of the deep pits where the bodies were put into. Initially were buried, then they were dug up and burned. I've done videos on these. There's some Sonderkommando 1005 example of burning of the bodies, and that was sort of in this area. Now the camp was divided into two, a sort of a living area, so to speak. That where those involved in camp detail, such as Willenberg, which was over there. The two parts of the camp were effectively supposed to be separate, but there was a certain amount of contact between the two. Jakub Wiernik, who was a carpenter, and he wrote his memoirs. His memoirs were published a year in Treblinka. It was first published by the Polish Underground in 1944 in Warsaw. So this is the death area where I am right now. So obviously the forest has completely reclaimed it. One of the things that the Nazis did was to try and make believe that nothing happened here. Now this to me doesn't make any sense. If they needed to murder the Jews and then they had to pretend they didn't murder the Jews, it's somewhat illogical, but it's hard to get into the mind of a conspiracy theorist. So what they did was they tried to make it, they planted trees. A Ukrainian family got a farmhouse here and to live in. In fact, down there, one can still see where bricks were. So you can see the amount of stones which are here. I think the point, not every stone has the name of a community on. I need to make that one quite clear. It's only the larger ones. It's difficult to say how many places people were from as well. So I think many of those without names represent places where didn't necessarily know where people came from who were killed here. For example, I don't think there is a stone for Łódź. I don't think, maybe there might be, maybe I haven't seen it. But I imagine that Łódź, being the second biggest Jewish community in Poland in 1939, would have been quite a number of victims from there. I mean, to come here today, it's really peaceful, and you can see actually I did a video in 2009 from here, and walking around in the snow, and on that day, I was the only person around, and it was, I think, ultra quiet. The camp itself isn't very big, or wasn't very big. At its widest point, it was no more than 500 meters. It had sort of a rhomboid shape. And as you can see, the land isn't, it's It's a bit hilly as well. The revolt here was like to a certain extent like in Sobibor was possible because there was no German staff here at the time of the revolt. Of course, in Sobibor they had to get rid of the staff by killing them. But I think that they didn't believe that the prisoners were likely to revolt, and so when they did, then it came as a surprise to them. Kurt Franz, who was then acting commandant, he stated that he was swimming by the river, but I think he was seeing some woman in Kosovlatsky, and he was probably a bit the worse for alcohol and failed to get back here on time. The camp itself is approximately about 6-7 kilometers from the Bug River. So it's often associated with the Bug River. Samuel Willenberg, after his escape, for example, he hid in the Bug River. He found an island and he hid on it, and he said the mosquitoes bit him horribly, and there's no shortage of them here. In the background you can hear the road. There's a new road which links here to Małkinia, for example. So I've just about walked completely round. There's some walking at a very slow pace, so that can give you an idea of how small the camp actually is. Yet it caused all this destruction. Not only that, the amount of people actually working here weren't it wasn't a huge amount of people, but what they did was when they liquidated a ghetto, they ensured that there was enough people there to make sure that the ghetto was liquidated. They used Jews to do part of the dirty work. That was a funny noise, I don't know where it came from. And so the likes of Jewish police trying to get Jewish organisations to do it, and so it was prepared in such a way as to show that they had thought about how they were actually going to do it. And the amount of staff here was not particularly large. At any one time there was probably no more than 30 Germans here in total, and to kill so many people, I think this was possible because of the way that they'd been kept. The people, the victims, they'd been starved, they'd been brutalized, they had been used for slave labor in the ghettos. They turned up, they lost hope. And I think this is the difference when it's often said about, well, the Jews didn't resist. I think it's because you can't compare this to sort of British prisoners of war trying to break out of POW camps. You know, you hardly ever get Soviet prisoners of war breaking out because they didn't have the energy and the hope to do so. Although I do accept there was a mass breakout by Soviet POWs from Mauthausen to almost at the end of the war. So, and I think this is very similar with Jews, is that because of the way they were treated. Of course, there were resistance organisations in a number of ghettos. There was fighting, and Warsaw and Białystok are well known. Nowogrodzic is alleged to have been it, but at Siemiatyce, for example, there was also armed uprising, and that one is, I think, not so well known. There you have, this is Treblinka. You've been around, well, not entirely, because this part here as well, because this down here, this is part of the camp as well. This is where the living area, so to speak, the prisoners' barracks was down here. The commandant had his place down there as well. As you can see, this is absolutely the tourist season. Today is the 11th of July 2024, and there's hardly anybody around. Although I confess, before I started filming, I did let some people get out of camera shot. I think the monument here is very good. I think it's very from the point of view of it represents the communities which were destroyed, and I think that's quite a good thing. In Belzec, you've got the city where you sort of walk down a tunnel. The one at Belzec wasn't opened until the 6th of June 2004, so that was 40 years after this one here was opened. And at Sobibor, I still don't know what the situation is. It was roughly here where the farmhouse stood, roughly, very approximately. That was meant to, so the idea was for the farmer to pretend he'd been here throughout the war and that nothing had happened here. And that's despite the ashes and the broken bones and things of that nature which were there. Everybody knew about what was happening here. There's no doubt about that. It was farmers working here, which you can see in Cloudlandsman's Shoah. There was not only that, there were people who escaped, who sent the messages back to Warsaw and other places. In the Oneg Shabbat archive, we have accounts of people who escaped and what they actually saw here. The stones mark the approximate location of where the barbed wire is, but it's only very approximate. It needs to be pointed out because since they were put up in '64, I think they're more put up for symbolic use and rather than to mark the exact boundary of the camp. Now, this was the second camp actually built here. We've got Treblinka 1, which is, if you follow this road down for a couple of kilometres, you'll get there. I noticed this thing here. There was a well, although I don't know what that is. But the well, first well that was dug, I thought was somewhere here. So, at the Holocaust, there's approximately 6 million people were murdered, 900,000 here. So, it's what, 15% of the Holocaust deaths happened here. And it's close to the amount of people from Auschwitz who were killed. The number of deaths, because we have the Herfler telegram, which gives the number of deaths precisely for Treblinka for 1942. I do appreciate that I used the word precisely, and the counting might not have been very good at when people were put on the trains, but nonetheless, I think it gives a very good approximation. Obozagłada means death camp. Obóz means camp, Zagłada, death. In this case, because death is also śmierć. And there we have, in the forest, the stones. Incidentally, if you come here, you don't want to start walking around as I am with sandals, bare feet, unless you've got some good protection on you. And today I was given some to try out, and so far nothing's bitten me that I'm aware of. So I hope you've found that interesting. I've got other videos related. Okay, I've got videos related to the Warsaw Ghetto number, but it's related to here to Treblinka. Well, I've got past visits. I've got a video relating to Irmfried Ebere, who was the first commandant, and the mess that he left here. I'm also in the process of doing a video on Höfler, the person noted for the telegram, but also because Höfler was the one who threatened Czerniaków, the head of the Judenrat in Warsaw. And his post-war fate, above all, I think is quite, let's say, interesting. You can watch the video once I've finished it. I started doing it about 4 months ago, and I want to do other people like Franz Suchermel, and there's Otto Horn, who I think is a very interesting character, and I do strongly recommend books by Willenberg and Samuel Willenberg and Gita Serene, above all. So for the moment, thanks so much for listening, coming with me through the camp here at Treblinka. And I'd like to suggest actually have a look at one of the videos I did on the Treblinka railway station, which not the Treblinka camp railway station, but the Treblinka railway station, which I think is quite curious. Okay, all the best from me. Bye for now.